All right, Coalition Purple. Hey, we're heading into the holidays. Can't believe it.
I'm not sure we can even say at this point we're heading into them. I think we are in the midst of them as
We
we
are
speak.
kind of into it. We are in the middle of it's weird. I don't know how it works in your world, but my world, usually around December 15th, everything just starts going really quiet with all the people I work with and stuff. I mean, it's just like, hello, is anybody there?
Yeah.
And that's a testimony to the people that go out and enjoy the holidays versus me worrying about it. So
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not complaining about them.
the thing is, it is funny because it's like a slow progression. It's like people just start leaving. You have a few people maybe that are really into the season, and they go like real early, and then a few more people trickle away and trickle away and trickle away, and next thing you know, it seems like your neighborhood is empty.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's wild. It's a weird phenomenon, but and I guess it's I was a journalist for 8 years. So back in those days, I never really had holidays. So holidays just don't. When that was early in my career, and and so ever since then, I've never really like thought about holidays. It's just another day to me.
Yeah.
And then my wife was a flight attendant, so same thing. She was like,
Yeah.
she would fly Christmases, Thanksgivings, whatever. And you just kind of get in this mode that, oh, that's right. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I forget, like whatever Veterans Day is on Monday or whatever, and it's like, oh, that's right, that's a holiday. So
Yeah, it's funny. All the years that I worked as a physical therapist, I basically worked on what they called per diem basis.
yeah,
So I would contact the various places that I worked and be like, "Do you need help? In this facility or that facility?" Or I did a lot of wound care stuff in there, maybe once or twice a week in various places, or you had very specific patients that you knew were on a list of things. And then because of that, when the holidays would roll around, I would just not schedule a lot of things for myself, and so
right,
it was always pretty straightforward and simple for me.
yeah, yeah. So anyways, well, what's going on in your world other than that when it comes to our favorite topic,
Yeah.
politics?
Well, it's a little weird for me because I've been thinking about something, and that's
Uh-oh.
always bad news when I start
Yeah.
thinking about something. It's not good. But anyway, I had heard some reports that when Trump gets into office, he's likely to attack Iran in conjunction with the Israelis, who are already starting to attack Iran, and just basically, I guess, wipe Iran off the face of the earth, more or less. And one of the arguments that people always make when these things start to happen is, well, you don't want to do that because you don't know what's going to come in next, and it could be worse, and it creates instability and blah blah blah. And you know, I, I'm not really sure what's going to happen with Iran, and I'm not really sure that I have a huge opinion on that. But what occurred to me, the more I was listening to people talk about how they're so afraid of what might happen, and therefore they're going to not act on anything, it just reminded me of California politics. And my whole life in California, it's essentially the same story. We can't get rid of the people who are doing all the bad stuff because we're afraid that the people who come in might be worse. And it's like paralysis.
Yeah.
And uh, I think that's one of the real roadblocks to a third party or a reconstituted Republican Party, however you want to look at it as far as California goes, is that if you're so afraid of what the next thing coming along might be, you just accept that it's just always going to be this gradual downhill slide.
Yeah.
And the last little part of it that sort of occurred to me is if you throw somebody out and replace them with somebody, they don't come in at the same level of power and influence as the old person had. I mean, like in California, we have these entrenched, political institutions that are
Yep.
all sort of like built around and interconnect with each other and working. If you started throwing them out and putting new people in, well, even if those people weren't great, or even maybe in some sense they were worse than the person they were there, they still wouldn't possess the power to do the things and to be as corrupt or as inactive or uncaring as the people that are in there now, because they'd be in the midst of a hostile atmosphere. They'd have to contend with all the existing structures that are there and tugging at them to try and tear them apart. And it's like, you have to, and that's why replacing people is worthwhile, because as soon as you start to break up the monopolies, you reduce the power of those groups that are doing the harmful things. And even if occasionally you get somebody who is quote unquote worse, well,
Right.
I mean, but they're so much significantly less powerful that just because they have a worse ideology doesn't mean that they're as effective at being as bad.
Yeah. No, it's funny how resistant people are to change
Yeah.
generally as a human species. And it was when this past election happened, they were talking about, the Democrats are getting pushed out of the office, and they were mainly talking about the presidency because the delta between, even though the Republicans have the power in the House and the Senate, I mean, the margin is still just
Razor thin.
ridiculously thin. So, and when it in the midterms, say the Democrats come back into power, it's going to be ridiculously thin, and we just keep shifting these little, 10 people, one way or the other kind of
Yeah.
thing, and nothing ever gets done. And it's funny you brought that up because I was also thinking this week that coming and talking, thinking about the podcast and all that, and maybe one of the things that I started thinking about is if there were how many are in the house? We have 435 house districts, I think, right, around the country.
Yeah, something like that.
So if we had one Coalition Purple in every house district, and basically we're replicated 434 other times, right, across the country, where there's a couple people just talking about specifically their district, because what's interesting about the house districts is within that you have state. I mean, it's the federal district, but you still have state representatives you're dealing with, local representatives you're dealing with, and we become the concentrated sort of thought leaders, for lack of a better term, for that one district to get people comfortable with making change. And because it's almost going to have to be a street to street battle,
Yeah.
at the local level like that.
Yep.
Because we were talking about last week, how many people are dissatisfied with Congress, yet they keep, reelecting their local rep.
Right.
And that's the cycle you got to figure out how to break it. The president thing, that's just going to come and go. You just don't have really any power over that, but you do at those other levels. So that was my thought, is maybe we kind of help promote, hey, I think I'm not exactly sure. You could be, are you in the 49th district? Do you know?
Well, interestingly enough,
You're still registered in LA.
In Los Angeles, right? So I'm in. I can't even remember what district I'm in, but it's not the one down here. It's
yeah. So, but I mean, it doesn't matter. You're starting to live here more and more, so eventually you'll probably change or whatever. But that's one thought I had, is like, if we can just kind of replicate it, and then we really kind of can. You always have to be concerned about the bigger overall issues going on out there, but at the same time, trying to motivate people at the local level. And again, we're here in particularly the 49th district is actually a really interesting place to start, because it is almost a 50-50 district. I mean, there because of Orange County in particular, there's a lot more Republicans. I mean, and Mike Levin won by 16,000 votes, which is not that much.
No, not much at all.
And so there is that possibility. And I think that's why actually both candidates this time, they were all both kind of driving towards the middle, because they knew. And that's kind of where you want to get, theoretically, every district.
Yeah, no, what I would love to see is, and this is sort of my idea for a third party for a long time, is seek out the districts where there is an unchallenged candidate, where they run unopposed,
right,
and then oppose them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a third party or anything.
Whatever.
Just go out there and start the opposition and say, look, you've been electing this person to office forever and they aren't doing anything good for you. So why don't you elect somebody different? And as soon as
Yeah,
you just start talking in those terms, I mean, all you need is turnover. And then,
exactly.
things can start to change.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I think we got to kind of rethink and think differently in how to go about it because it's so easy just to fall back into that trap
Yeah.
of, oh yeah, I've heard this guy's name before or whatever, and they keep voting for it. And there's enough local issues, and I think the one that came to pass for me in this last election here locally was, they were trying to pass an additional gas tax for
Mm,
Sandag,
yeah.
and it was a great example where I think people finally got fed up. It's like, and that one went down. It didn't pass, and usually that would have passed,
Yeah.
but I think people have had it. So you take those kind of key issues like that, and start having conversations because I think that are objective. Because just because it's a tax doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but because you got to pay for stuff somehow. But I think people have realized, hey, we keep paying more and more fuel taxes in particular, and less gets done. And the
Yeah.
other thing, or it's like I was just reading the paper this morning about they did a study. I think it was 28. I'll try and remember to put the link in. 28 different major homeless organizations in San
Yeah.
Diego County, and they did the study, and just basically it came down and said nobody knows what the other one's doing. It's not being effective. We're
Yep.
spending. They're living from funding cycle to funding cycle, and they're grabbing from this pot and that pot, and it's like there's absolutely no coordination is the bottom line of it, right?
Yeah.
Which was not a surprise, but and so that's another example where if we could get down to the local level and really start kind of having those discussions and saying, well, the people that put this in place are the ones that you voted in. Maybe we should think about changing some things.
Yeah. The ones calling the shots are the ones we keep
Yeah,
re-electing.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's interesting too about taxes. There's sort of two things that I always sort of think about a little bit when we talk about taxes and raising taxes. The first thing obviously is that if the government is spending the money that it takes in so badly and wasting so much of it, that there never, to me, seems like a very good reason to give them more money. So
right,
in that sense, I don't generally favor tax increases. If you show me some kind of responsibility, if you show me that you're spending the money wisely and we're getting some bang for a buck, okay, then I'll start thinking about maybe having some new taxes. But until then, not so much. But the other thing that's really key about taxes, and I think needs to be talked about more, is in asking the question just sort of rhetorically, what is the purpose of taxation? And really, there's only one purpose for taxation, and that is to create revenue for the government. Some people look at taxes as like a moral thing, like we should put sin taxes on things. Like if we put more taxes on gasoline, then people won't drive gas cars.
right.
But that's not what taxes are for. It's not the
No,
government's job to,
right,
tax gasoline powered cars out of existence. Taxation is for revenue for the government. The government needs to exist. The government therefore needs revenue. So the best taxation policy is the policy that generates the most revenue for the government. Now, in the case of California, when you have such a messed up tax code that businesses start leaving the state and no new businesses are coming in, then yes, you're raising taxes, but you're actually losing revenue. That's why the government right now has such a big deficit. It's not like
right.
California suddenly slashed all of the taxes in California. It's that people left and they took all their income and all their innovation and all their industry with them. And when you start having a tax policy that's so punishing towards the people that live in a given area that they all decide to leave,
Right.
well, then you need to think about reworking your tax policy because it's no longer the tax policy that brings in the greatest amount of revenue for the government. It just doesn't make any sense at all at that point.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to just trying to break the cycle, kind of building on that, I was also reading about the military on the federal level. The military, for the seventh year in a row, did
Oh,
not
God,
pass an
yeah.
audit.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's like,
It's a
I mean,
good
literally, there's billions and billions of dollars. They have no idea where it is. and they've got billions and billions of inventory that they don't need, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and it, when you read through it, it's like, well, yeah, military. They have like 28. Again, 28 seemed to be the magic number this week. There's like 28 main buckets that the military budget is focused on, and 15 out of the 28 were just so bad that they weren't. And then there's a bunch that were like on the edge of not passing. But the overall budget is definitely not passing the audit for the seventh year in a row. And but then they were saying, but the military isn't, percentage wise, isn't that unusual compared to other departments in the federal government, that they're just big black hole.
Yeah,
It's
it's like, wait a minute, what? It's
like,
like
wait,
everything else is so bad that this has to be bad too. It's like, no way.
yeah, right. And it's like the only difference is the military's budget is so huge
Right.
that it makes a big difference. And it's, again, going back to the tax thing, do we really need to raise taxes? And now I'm starting to sound like a conservative, but do we really need to? When you look at the billions and billions of dollars that are gone missing, and Bernie Sanders has railed on this for years, right? He's always said, hey, if all we do is cut out the waste in the military, we can fund all these wild ideas I have. And he's got a point. Now, you may disagree with, well, do you really want to fund free university forever and all this kind of stuff? But his point is a good one, I think, that if all you do is just simply fix the military budget, we have all kinds of money to do these things. We don't have to raise any more money. Yeah. And you can apply that to a lot of different buckets within the federal government. But at the end of the day, you got to be electing people that are overseeing that money.
Well, the part that, like you say, as far as the electing people that will overlook the money goes, part of the problem we've had in this country, I think, for a really long time is sort of the uniparty's idea that there are three buckets of money that can never be touched: Social Security, Medicare, and the military. Yep. And it's sort of like the left theoretically is sort of protecting Medicare and Social Security, while the right is sort of protecting the military. But the reality is they're both agreed that nobody's going to touch any of those things. And once everybody realizes that they're never going to touch any of those things, the waste just comes pouring out of it. And so, there's a massive amount of waste and abuse within the military budgeting. There's no question about that. But Medicare is an absolute mess, and it's going to go bankrupt. And there's there's tons of Medicare fraud. As somebody who's done Medicare billing, there is a lot of fraud in Medicare billing. Yes. And then Social Security, if I'm being completely and frankly honest, I would say that we should immediately start ramping down Social Security. Okay. Everyone who's paid into it, they have to get their money out of it. They paid into it. That's absolutely their money.
Yes.
But for God's sakes, the government just takes the money that people put into Social Security. It's not like it's some kind of an account. And the return on the Social Security money is just awful.
It's terrible.
And so if people not to get too into the weeds on investing, but like ETFs that track, say, the Dow.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's going to get you a better return.
Oh, easy.
It basically,
it's turnkey. It's turnkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's pretty much turnkey. No, I know. And again, it's one of those things where I think it's one of those issues that just takes the will of the people that are elected to start coming up with this. Because when Social Security started, it made sense. And there was, to a large degree, because you had whatever it was, 12 or 15 people working for every one retiree. Well, now that's totally flip-flop, basically. Yep. And the only way you get out of it is to start transitioning yourself out to get it to a place where, hey, you may still have, because I think the one thing that Social Security and Medicare both do that's important is it does provide a safety net for those who don't plan. And if we don't have, and it's not like we should have to take care of people, but the reality is one way you're going to end up taking care of people. If you don't have something in place, it's kind of like the homeless. It's like, if you don't have some way to move them along and help them then they're just going to show up in the emergency room all the time, right?
Yeah,
And
I
so,
think that I was going to say, I think that what would be better than what we have as far as Social Security goes is that you could regulate things in a way that says you're mandated to put 2% of your earnings into something.
right.
And there would be things that were recommended and things that are safe and, whatever.
Yep.
But they would be privately owned things. And that would infuse a lot of money into the economy and
Exactly.
for a lot of investment to do that. And it would get it away from the government who's just throwing it down the toilet and wasting it. And it would get people a better return. And because it would be mandated by regulatory agencies, things would get done. And so people would still have that. And so I actually have thought for a really long time that getting rid of Social Security would be relatively straightforward. There's some other things involved in Social Security, like Social Security disability and things like that.
Right.
And so I think you might want to have some programs like that, but they'd be much more targeted, much more limited. They could be much more easily run. They'd make a lot more sense. It wouldn't just be this huge bucket of money that the politicians are stealing.
Yeah.
And then again, so you can deal with Social Security, you can deal with the military. And then as far as dealing with Medicare concerns, that's the one that is really, really complicated. Our entire medical industry is basically built around Medicare. And so I have some ideas about that, that I've thought about over the years. But I mean, it's definitely that problem is going to take a lot of thought and a lot of work.
That's
but
a very complicated.
If you can start working on the other two, if you can start working on the military and Social Security, oh my God, you can start striking things out. It would be huge.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, it just takes the will of people that are in leadership positions to start working on it. Because, like you said, people that have paid into Social Security, are you getting a weird message? Device struggling to record. I don't know. I guess that's on my side. Oh. Anyways, the transition, the people that paid into it should get what they're owed. But now is the time to start transitioning over whatever it is, 15, 20-year period, however long it makes sense.
Yeah.
So like, my 30-year-old son, I mean, he shouldn't be paying into Social Security.
Yeah. I mean, the system's going to
exist.
It's going to go bankrupt. So they're just going to end up taking all the money's paying into it. Stop paying in. You've got an investment. Whatever the investment is that you paid in, that's yours. You should get that out. But stop paying into it and start paying into something that will actually show a return at some point and has some value as far as, infusing, capital into our capitalist system. So, I mean, it'd be much better to just start doing that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So anyways, I'm going to just let me see if I can pause this. I want to see I'm getting a weird message right now. Hold on.
Yeah, the audio seems good, but the picture is a little weird.
Yeah. Hold on. I'm going to just stop it and then we'll restart.